I should have known my life was about to shatter the moment I kissed my husband goodbye and felt nothing. It was a regular Tuesday morning in August, the kind of morning I'd lived through hundreds of times before. Coffee brewing, sunlight cutting through the kitchen blinds, my uniform folded neatly on the chair, ready for another 12-hour shift. I'm a paramedic in Los Angeles, 8 years on the job. I've seen bodies twisted in car wrecks, overdoses that stole teenagers in front of their parents, gunshot wounds that never leave your dreams. I thought I understood shock, trauma, the worst moments a human body could endure. I was wrong. Nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the moment I would walk into a luxury hotel room and realize the man I married didn't exist. My husband, Ethan Reed, stood in the kitchen that morning adjusting his tie with careful precision. Dark hair still damp from the shower. That familiar practiced smile I'd learned to accept instead of question. We'd been married for 5 years, together for 7, long enough that routine had replaced curiosity. Another late night? I asked, leaning against the counter, watching him apply cologne like it was armor. Client meeting, he said easily. Probably won't be back until after 11. He kissed my cheek, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive cedarwood. Don't wait up, babe. I heard that line so often it barely registered anymore. Ethan worked in high-end consulting. Discreet, vague, lucrative. The money he brought in dwarfed my paramedic salary, which should have bothered me more than it did. But I told myself love wasn't a balance sheet. I told myself trust mattered more than questions. By the time my shift started that afternoon, my chest felt tight for reasons I couldn't explain. My partner noticed immediately. You're quiet today, she said while we restocked the ambulance. Everything okay at home? I almost said yes. Then the call came in. 6:47 p.m. Possible cardiac event. Grandview Hotel, room 1942. The moment I heard the address, something cold slid down my spine. The Grandview wasn't just any hotel. It was a place known for discretion, for secrets, for people who didn't want to be seen. As the sirens cut through traffic and the city blurred past my window, one thought echoed louder than the alarms in my head. Please don't let it be him. I had no idea that within minutes I would be standing face to face with the truth, and that my marriage was about to become the most horrifying call of my entire career. I used to think my life was built on solid things. A stable career, a clean sense of purpose, a marriage that, even when it felt imperfect, still felt real, like something we could fix with time, patience, and enough honest conversations. That belief didn't die all at once. It bled out slowly, quietly, in the space between Ethan's "Don't wait up, babe," and the way he stopped looking me in the eyes when he said it. I'm Marina Reed, 34 years old, born and raised in Southern California, the kind of woman who learned early that survival requires structure. I don't fall apart in public. I don't scream in crisis. I compartmentalize. I triage. I fix what can be fixed and document what can't. It's not just my job. It's my personality. When you work as a paramedic in Los Angeles, you develop a strange relationship with time. You learn what 30 seconds can cost. You learn how fragile a life looks when you're kneeling on asphalt with someone's blood soaking your gloves. You learn how quickly love turns into grief and how often people say, I didn't know it would be the last time. So I tried, maybe too hard, to make sure my own life didn't unravel. I met Ethan 7 years ago at a fundraiser event I didn't even want to attend. My coworker at the station had begged me to come, some charity dinner that raised money for first responder families. I remember showing up in a plain black dress, hair pulled into a low knot, feeling out of place among all the polished smiles and champagne glasses. Ethan was there because he'd helped sponsor the event through his company. He looked like he belonged in that room in a way I never did. Smooth suit, calm voice, eyes that scanned a crowd like he was measuring people for weaknesses without letting them see him doing it. But when he approached me, he softened. Are you enjoying yourself? He asked, holding out a glass of sparkling water like he'd already noticed I wasn't drinking. I remember blinking at him, surprised. I'm surviving, I said. He laughed, not loud, not showy, the kind of laugh that felt like private acknowledgement. Then you're doing better than half the people here, he replied. That line, it worked on me. Because it sounded like he saw me, like he understood that I wasn't built for pretend. We talked the rest of the night. He asked about my job, really asked. Not the usual, wow, that must be intense, but questions about what made someone good at it, what it cost you emotionally, how you stayed human when you saw death every day. And when I left, He didn't try to impress me with a car or a flashy goodbye. He just said, "Can I see you again? I'd like to keep talking." It felt clean, real. For the first 2 years, Ethan was steady, not passionate in a wild way, more like a man who promised consistency and delivered it. He came to my station with takeout when I worked overnight shifts. He learned the difference between trauma humor and cruelty. He sat with me in silence on the nights when I came home with someone else's grief stuck to my skin. When we moved in together, he didn't act like I was a guest in his life. He made space, closet space, shelf space, emotional space. And when he proposed, it wasn't dramatic. It was on a quiet Sunday morning. My hair was still damp, I was barefoot, and I was complaining about how my knees hurt from running stairs at work. He knelt down in the kitchen like it was the most natural thing in the world, opened a small velvet box, and said, "Marina, you live in chaos for a living. Let me be your peace." I cried so hard I couldn't even answer. So yes, he bought the ring. He slid it onto my finger. He kissed my hands like I was something precious. I married him because I believed he was safe. And for a while, he was. But marriage doesn't just reveal love. It reveals priorities. It reveals secrets. It reveals what people will protect when protecting you becomes inconvenient. After the wedding, Ethan's career accelerated in ways I didn't fully understand. More calls taken in the garage. More client dinners. More flights that popped up last minute. He started using phrases that sounded vague on purpose. Risk management, high profile, confidential accounts. And whenever I tried to get clarity, he'd smile, like I was adorable for asking. "You don't want to be bored by my work," he'd say. At first, I told myself it was normal. Event planning had been the excuse in the original version of this story. But in my life, my female life, Ethan's work became the same kind of shield. Different label, same pattern. Irregular hours, business trips, money that didn't align with explanations. The money was the part I couldn't ignore. I made decent income, but not designer gifts on a Tuesday income. Ethan started bringing home expensive things in a way that felt careless. A watch I didn't recognize in a drawer, a new leather duffel bag that smelled like someone else's cologne. Wine bottles I hadn't bought from vineyards I'd never heard of. A sudden preference for luxury hotels when we traveled, even for small weekend trips. And when I asked lightly, "How are you affording all this?" he'd kiss my forehead and say, "I'm good at what I do." The first time I felt real suspicion wasn't even about another woman. It was about the way he stopped being present. He'd be in bed next to me, scrolling his phone with the brightness turned down, smiling at something he wouldn't share. Then he'd roll over, tuck the phone under his pillow, and tell me I was imagining things when I asked if something was funny. He started caring about appearances in a way that didn't match his old self. His gym outfits were suddenly coordinated. His haircuts got sharper. His posture changed, like he was practicing being a different version of himself. And the worst part? When I came home exhausted, wanting comfort, he gave me efficiency. A quick kiss, a quick, "How was your shift?" A quick, "I'm proud of you." Then back to his phone. I told myself I was being unfair, because paramedics see betrayal everywhere. We see the aftermath. We see spouses crying over hospital beds with secrets hanging in the air. We see how often "I love you" is said too late. So I tried to be the opposite. I tried to be trusting. I tried to be the kind of wife who doesn't accuse without proof. And Ethan's family didn't help. His mother always called him special. His father always implied Ethan was destined for bigger things. Even at dinners, I felt like a supporting character in Ethan's hero story. "If you weren't so busy running around saving strangers, you'd understand the value of building wealth," his mother once joked. I laughed because I didn't want conflict. But later, driving home, I remember gripping the steering wheel too tightly, thinking, "So my life matters less because I don't make money the way you do?" Ethan never defended me. He'd just squeeze my thigh under the table like that was enough. Over time, those tiny moments stacked up. Not enough to prove wrongdoing. Just enough to make my stomach tighten every time he said "work trip." Just enough to make me stare at my reflection in the bathroom mirror and wonder when I started feeling lonely inside my own marriage. So when he kissed me goodbye on that Tuesday morning last August, and his smile didn't reach his eyes, I felt it. Not proof, not certainty. Just the instinct I used on calls when something felt wrong even before the patient collapsed. And instincts like that? They're rarely wrong. There's a difference between suspicion and certainty. Suspicion whispers. It sits in the back of your mind and waits for confirmation. Certainty hits like a siren, loud, unavoidable, impossible to ignore. What I lived with during those months wasn't certainty, it was something worse. Doubt. Doubt turns you inward. It makes you question your instincts, your memory, even your worth. It convinces you that you are the unstable variable, not the situation. At work, I trusted my gut without hesitation. At home, I betrayed it daily. Ethan's behavior didn't explode into obvious red flags. It eroded quietly, like water wearing down stone, subtle, persistent. He stopped asking about my calls in detail, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't want to invest energy in a life that required emotional presence. When I talked about a patient who didn't make it, he'd nod while scrolling, offering sympathy without engagement. "I'm sorry, babe, that's rough." Then silence. When I reached for him in bed, his body stayed still longer than it used to. Sometimes he'd turn away under the excuse of being tired. Other times he'd pull me close with mechanical precision, like intimacy was a box he checked to maintain appearances. I noticed patterns because that's what my job trained me to do. Ethan showered immediately when he got home from late meetings. His phone never left his hand, bathroom included. He started locking his laptop even inside our house. Once, when I picked up his phone to check the time, he reacted too fast. "Don't!" he snapped, then softened instantly. "Sorry, work stuff. Confidential." That word again. Confidential. It became the shield for everything. His family began to echo it too. At a Sunday dinner, his sister leaned across the table and said, half smiling, "You know, Ethan's world isn't really transparent. You married into complexity. Like it was a privilege. Like I should be grateful to be adjacent to whatever secret life he was building." I smiled back and said nothing, but inside something curled tight and sharp. I wasn't naive. I'd seen infidelity up close on calls, wives discovering hotel receipts, husbands deleting messages while their spouses lay unconscious. I'd always thought cheating would be the worst betrayal imaginable. But the version I imagined involved another woman. Lipstick, perfume, a name. What I didn't consider was the possibility that the real affair wasn't with a person, but with power, money, control. The first real crack came from someone who had no reason to lie to me. My partner noticed my distraction one evening while we were cleaning equipment after a long shift. "You're in your head," she said. "That's dangerous in our line of work." I forced a laugh, just tired. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "I probably shouldn't say this, but a friend of mine works security downtown, at the Grand View Hotel." My stomach tightened before she even finished. She mentioned seeing a man who looks exactly like Ethan there, weekday afternoons, always with different clients, always requesting the same floor. I stared at her, the hum of the ambulance bay suddenly too loud. "Different clients?" I asked carefully. She shrugged. "That's what she said. Could be work, but it felt weird." I told myself not to jump to conclusions. I told myself I was projecting. But once the idea lodged itself in my mind, I couldn't unsee the pieces. The Grand View wasn't near any of Ethan's listed offices. It was known for privacy. And the timing lined up perfectly with his flexible schedule. I didn't confront him. Not because I was afraid, but because something told me that if I pushed too soon, he'd disappear behind that polished smile, and I'd lose whatever chance I had to understand the truth. Instead, I watched. I paid attention. I noticed how his mood shifted after certain meetings, how sometimes he came home energized, almost exhilarated, other nights, tense and irritable, snapping over nothing. I noticed how he began complimenting me differently. Less about who I was, more about how I looked. "You look great tonight," he'd say without meeting my eyes. "You should dress like that more often." It felt like evaluation. Like I was being measured against something, or someone, I couldn't see. One night I asked him directly, my voice steady, my hands folded in my lap, "Are you happy?" He froze for half a second too long. "Of course," he said. "Why wouldn't I be?" I wanted to ask 100 follow-up questions. Instead, I nodded. Because doubt makes you cautious. And somewhere deep down, I felt it. That if I pulled the wrong thread, everything would unravel. I just didn't know how violently. The call came in at 6:47 p.m. Possible cardiac event, Grand View Hotel, room 1842. For a fraction of a second, I couldn't breathe. In this job, you don't get the luxury of processing fear. You acknowledge it, lock it away, and move. Muscle memory took over as I grabbed my bag, climbed into the ambulance, and called out vitals protocols like my life depended on it. Because emotionally, it did. The drive downtown felt longer than it should have. Sirens screamed through traffic, Red lights reflected off storefront windows, and every block we passed tightened the pressure behind my eyes. Neither my partner nor I said a word. We didn't have to. The grand view rose out of the city like a monument to secrecy, marble facade, valet line filled with cars that cost more than my annual salary. Inside, everything gleamed. Brass railings, soft lighting, the smell of money and quiet desperation. A hotel staff member met us at the elevator, hands trembling. 18th floor, he said. Guest reported chest pain. In the elevator, my heart started racing, not from exertion, but from certainty. This wasn't coincidence anymore. The doors opened to a hallway lined with thick carpet that swallowed our footsteps. Room 1842 sat at the end, isolated, like it had been chosen on purpose. I knocked. Los Angeles Fire Department, my partner called out. We received a call about chest pain. The door opened just enough for a man in his 50s to peer out. Expensive suit wrinkled, face flushed, eyes darting. I'm fine, he said quickly. It was just anxiety. Sir, my partner replied calmly, we still need to evaluate you. Reluctantly, he opened the door wider. And that's when my world ended. Ethan was inside, not alone. He stood near the window, jacket off, shirt partially unbuttoned. The look on his face, shock, recognition, calculation, all passed so quickly I almost missed it. And then I saw her. A woman sat on the edge of the king-size bed in a silk robe, phone clenched in her hand like a lifeline. Her hair was perfectly styled, makeup flawless. She looked composed in a way that didn't match the situation. Time stopped. My ears rang so loudly I could hear my own breathing. The woman's eyes met mine and widened. Ethan's face drained of color. Marina, he said, my name cracking in his throat. I didn't answer. I set my medical bag down with deliberate care. My hands were steady. My voice, when I spoke, sounded professional, detached. Ma'am, I said, eyes never leaving my husband, we're here for the patient. The man cleared his throat. Richard Foster, he said weakly, but really, I feel better now. Your wife didn't call, my partner said quietly, scanning the room. Hotel staff did. Did you collapse in the hallway? Richard's lie dissolved. He sank into a chair, suddenly gray. And that's when my partner froze. Her gaze locked onto the woman's wrist. She grabbed my arm, hard. Marina, she whispered urgently, don't touch her. Call it in, now. What? I whispered back, confused. Look, at her wrist. I did. A small tattoo, barely an inch wide, a crown above a scroll, numbers etched beneath it. Recognition hit me like a punch. I'd seen it during a training session on organized crime infiltration, a symbol associated with a sophisticated blackmail network operating across the West Coast. My bag slipped from my hands. Supplies scattered across the floor. The woman lunged for her phone, but my partner was faster, gently guiding her back onto the bed. Don't move, she said calmly. You're going to want to sit down. Ethan's voice broke. What's happening? Marina, what is this? I finally spoke. Not as his wife, not as someone in love, but as someone seeing the truth for the first time. Call it in, I said. Then I turned and walked out of the room, leaving behind my marriage, my past, and every illusion I had ever trusted. I don't remember how I got out of the hotel. I remember the carpet under my boots felt too soft, like it couldn't support my weight. I remember the elevator mirror reflecting a woman I didn't recognize, pale, rigid, eyes too sharp for someone who was supposed to be falling apart. Shock doesn't always look like screaming. Sometimes it looks like silence. By the time I reached the lobby, my hands finally started shaking. Not violently, just enough to remind me that my body understood what my mind hadn't caught up to yet. My husband was inside that room, with another woman, and something far darker than an affair. Outside, the air felt wrong. Too warm, too alive. Traffic moved like nothing had happened, like my world hadn't just split in half on the 18th floor of a luxury hotel. I leaned against the ambulance, breathing slowly, counting like I'd done for patients on the brink. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 6. It didn't help. Within minutes, patrol cars arrived, then unmarked vehicles, then people in plain clothes with calm eyes and clipped movements, the kind of professionals who didn't rush because they didn't need to. I gave my statement twice at the scene. Once again, later at the station. Each time, the words felt foreign in my mouth. Yes, that's my husband. No, I had no idea. No, I've never seen that woman before. No, I've never seen that tattoo. Past midnight, I sat in a gray interview room with a paper cup of coffee growing cold in my hands. Across from me sat Detective Ryan Torres, salt and pepper hair, exhaustion etched deep into his face, and Detective Lisa Chen, sharp-eyed, observant in a way that felt surgical. They didn't treat me like a suspect. They treated me like a liability. "Let me make sure I understand," Torres said gently. "You responded to a medical call and discovered your husband in a hotel room with a woman connected to a criminal organization." "Yes." "You never suspected his involvement in anything illegal?" "No," I said, and hated how small the word sounded. Chen leaned forward. "Marina, the organization tied to that tattoo doesn't recruit randomly. This isn't petty crime. It's blackmail, extortion, identity theft. They target wealthy men, compromise them, and drain them financially." My stomach twisted. "How long?" I asked quietly. Torres slid a folder across the table. Photos. Ethan entering hotels, leaving with different women, always discreet, always clean. The earliest timestamp was 3 years ago. 3 years. Almost the entire duration of our marriage. "Your husband isn't the mastermind," Chen continued, "but he's deeply involved. We believe he's been facilitating introductions, helping with logistics. He plays the respectable spouse role very convincingly." The words hit harder than the images. I wasn't just betrayed. I was used. "We've been trying to take this organization down for 2 years, Torres said. "Your discovery today puts us closer than we've ever been." I looked up. "What does that have to do with me?" They exchanged a glance. Then Chen said it. "We need your help." The room seemed to tilt. "You want me to do what?" I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. "Maintain your relationship with Ethan," Torres said carefully. "At least publicly. If you confront him now, he'll disappear. We need evidence, communications, financial records, schedules. And you're the only one with daily access." "You want me to spy on my own husband," I said flatly. "We want you to help us stop an organization that's destroying lives," Chen corrected. "And yes, it means living a lie a little longer." I stood up, pacing the room. Hours ago, my biggest fear had been infidelity. Now I was being asked to become an undercover asset in my own marriage. "What happens to the people he's already hurt?" I asked. Chen didn't hesitate. "One man ended his life 6 months ago after being blackmailed. Another lost everything: business, family, reputation." My chest constricted. Images of patients I couldn't save flashed through my mind. "How long has Ethan been doing this?" I whispered. Torres didn't sugarcoat it. "At least 3 years." I closed my eyes. Every late night, every lie, every dollar I didn't understand. Blood money, dressed up as success. "When he comes home," Chen said, "he'll have a story. His lawyer will tell him to play confused, wronged, victimized." "And you want me to play the supportive wife?" I said. "Yes." The idea made my skin crawl. But then I thought of the men in those photos, of families destroyed quietly, efficiently, of how easily Ethan had stood in that hotel room and looked me in the eye, without shame. "On one condition," I said finally. They looked up. "When this is over," I continued, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest, "I want to be the one who tells him it's done. I want him to know exactly what he lost." Torres stood and extended his hand. "Deal." Ethan came home at dawn. I was waiting in the kitchen with 2 cups of coffee and a face carefully arranged into concern instead of devastation. He froze in the doorway when he saw me. "Marina," he said hoarsely, "I can explain." I tilted my head, letting uncertainty, not anger, fill my eyes. "This is all a misunderstanding, right?" I asked softly. Relief flooded his face. And just like that, the most dangerous performance of my life began. Living with Ethan after that night was like sharing a house with a stranger who knew my favorite coffee mug and the exact way I liked my hair touched, but nothing else about who I was. Every morning, I woke up before him and lay still, listening to his breathing, reminding myself that this was temporary, that I wasn't weak, that I was strategic. When he finally came home from the station that first morning, released on bail, shaken but not broken, he played his role flawlessly. "Confused, injured, wronged? They think I'm part of something I don't understand," he told me, rubbing his temples, as if the weight of injustice alone might crush him. "That woman, she's just a client, I swear to you." I didn't argue. I poured him coffee. I asked if he wanted eggs. I nodded at all the right moments. Behind his shoulder, the tiny camera the detectives had installed inside our smoke detector blinked softly. Everything was being recorded. Ethan leaned into the performance hard. He became gentler, more attentive. He texted during the day. "Miss you. Thank you for believing in me. I don't know what I'd do without you." Each message made my stomach twist. At night, When he wrapped an arm around my waist, I stayed still and stared at the ceiling, counting breaths the way I did with patients who needed grounding. In for 4, hold, out for 6. I didn't sleep much. The escalation didn't come all at once. It arrived through pressure, first from his family. His mother called 3 days after his release, her voice sharp with indignation. "This is a witch hunt," she snapped. "People like Ethan don't get mixed up in criminal nonsense. Someone is trying to ruin him." I murmured agreement. She lowered her voice. "You're standing by him, right? This isn't the time to be emotional." There it was. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "This must be hard for you." Just expectation. His sister dropped by, unannounced, with pastries and thinly veiled judgment. "You know," she said lightly, setting a box on the counter, "a lot of marriages don't survive pressure like this. But Ethan needs stability. He needs you calm." I smiled and thanked her. Inside, something hardened. Friends followed. Couples we'd socialized with distanced themselves subtly. Texts went unanswered. Invitations disappeared. Others leaned in, offering advice laced with blame. "Men make mistakes," one woman whispered over coffee. "But airing them publicly? That's worse." I nodded and reported everything. At work, I became sharper, quieter, hyper-focused. Ethan thought my emotional withdrawal was fear. He had no idea it was clarity. Every night after he fell asleep, I moved carefully through his home office, photographing documents, forwarding emails, logging transaction numbers, shell corporations, encrypted messaging apps, passwords saved under lazy names, Royal 2019, as if he'd never expected anyone to look closely. The money told the story better than words ever could. Large deposits, foreign accounts, transfers that didn't match any legitimate consulting work. I sent everything to Detective Chen. Jake, my partner, became my anchor. During lunch breaks in the ambulance, I finally let my mask slip. "I feel like I'm living with a ghost," I told her once, staring at my hands. "Like the man I married never existed." "You're doing better than most would," she said quietly. "But it's taking a toll." She was right. Ethan started planning something big. I could feel it. He was more energized, more secretive. He smiled in a way that reminded me of gamblers who thought they were about to win everything back. One night, while he was showering, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. A name flashed on the screen. I didn't recognize it. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't need to. Later, I told Chen. "That's consistent with what we're seeing," she said. "They're preparing a high-value target, a major move." The escalation reached a breaking point the night Ethan came home buzzing with adrenaline. "I might have to travel this weekend," he said casually, opening a beer. "Big opportunity. Career-defining." I forced a smile. "Where to?" "Downtown," he replied. "Grandview area." My pulse stayed steady. Inside, something cold and deliberate settled into place. I knew then that the storm was coming, and I was standing directly in its path, waiting. The night before everything ended, I finally broke. Not outwardly, not in a way anyone could see, but inside something gave way. Ethan slept beside me, breathing evenly, one arm draped across my waist, like he still owned the space. The room was dark, except for the faint glow of his phone charging on the nightstand. Every so often, it vibrated softly. Notification is muted, but persistent. I stared at the ceiling and felt the weight of it all crash down at once. The lies. The pretending. The way I'd smiled at his mother while reporting her words to the police. The way I'd nodded along as friends implied I should be grateful my husband was still providing. I had never felt so alone. Not even on the worst calls. Not even kneeling beside strangers as their lives slipped away in my hands. Because at least in those moments, the truth was clear. Here, the truth was something I had to swallow every day and keep hidden behind my teeth. I slipped out of bed and went into the bathroom, closing the door silently. The mirror caught my reflection under harsh white light. I barely recognized myself. My eyes looked older, harder, like someone who had aged years in weeks. I turned on the sink just enough to muffle sound and grip the edge of the counter, breathing through the tightness in my chest. This was the lowest point. Not the hotel room, not the interrogation, not even discovering who Ethan really was. This moment, standing alone in my own house, married to a man I was actively helping destroy, was worse, because it required endurance. Because it demanded I keep loving gestures in place while love itself had rotted. I thought about the future Ethan believed he was securing. More money, more power. Another man ruined quietly behind closed doors. And I thought about myself, how easy it would be to confront him, to scream, to end the charade and walk away. But then I remembered the photos in that file. The man who'd ended his life, the families shattered by blackmail, the people who never got to confront their monsters. If I quit now, Ethan would vanish, and all of it would continue. I sank down onto the bathroom floor, knees pulled to my chest, forehead pressed against cool tile. For the first time since this began, tears came. Silent, controlled, hot. Not for Ethan. For me. For the woman who had trusted without suspicion. For the marriage I thought was built on honesty. For the version of myself that believed love alone was protection. I stayed there until the tears dried on their own. When I finally stood, I wiped my face, squared my shoulders, and looked at myself again. This was the bottom. And I understood something with brutal clarity. If I could survive this, if I could sit in this pain without collapsing, then there was nothing left that could break me. I returned to bed and lay there stiffly while Ethan shifted and pulled me close, murmuring my name in his sleep. I didn't move, because the woman he was holding, she no longer existed. The turning point didn't arrive with drama. It came with precision. Thursday night, Ethan told me he'd be working late again. His voice was calm, confident, too confident. The kind of confidence people have when they believe every variable is controlled. I smiled, kissed his cheek, and told him to be careful. Then I drove somewhere he didn't expect. An unmarked surveillance van sat parked 2 blocks away from a quiet restaurant in West Hollywood. I climbed inside and put on the headset Detective Chen handed me. On the small monitor in front of me, the camera feed flickered to life. And there he was, my husband, seated at a table with 3 other people. This wasn't a client dinner. This was a meeting. The woman at the head of the table had an air of effortless authority. Silver blonde hair cut sharply, posture perfect, eyes that missed nothing. Diana Hartwell. I recognized her instantly from the briefing photos. The woman who ran the operation under the cover of a legitimate PR firm. To her right sat Nicole Porter, stunning, polished, the kind of woman magazines loved. To her left, Brandon Lee, tech specialist, eyes always moving, fingers never still. And Ethan? Ethan leaned forward, engaged, alive. This was where he belonged. Their voices came through clearly. The Parker situation needs to be flawless, Diana said coolly. We only get 1 shot. I've already made contact, Ethan replied. He's cautious but interested. Dinner is scheduled for Saturday. Suite level. My fingers curled into fists. And the setup? Nicole asked. Brandon tapped his tablet. Cameras installed. Security feeds compromised. If we need compliance, pharmaceuticals are ready. My breath caught. Pharmaceuticals. Sedation. This wasn't just extortion anymore. It was assault. Initial demand is $5 million, Diana continued. If he hesitates, we escalate. Board members. Family. And Ethan's cut? Nicole asked casually. Diana smiled. $400,000. Consider it a bonus. You've been very productive. Ethan smiled back. Proud. That was the moment. Not when I learned he was involved. Not when I saw him with another woman. But when I realized there was no hesitation in him. No doubt, no guilt. This was who he was when the mask came off. When the meeting ended, Detective Chen turned to me. We have enough, she said quietly. But Saturday seals it. We catch them in the act, it becomes federal. RICO. No escape. I nodded. What do you need from me? An alibi, she said. Ethan will tell you he has a work event Saturday night. You need to act like you believe him. Be somewhere public, visible, with witnesses. I'll do it, I said without hesitation. Then she added softly, there's something else. She slid a thin file across the table. Before you met Ethan, he was engaged to another woman, Rachel Lawson. She died in a single-car accident 7 years ago. My chest tightened. He told me, I said it was tragic, sudden. The accident was never fully investigated, Chen replied. Brake failure. She'd changed her will 2 weeks earlier, left everything to Ethan. The implications settled heavily between us. We think he's capable of more than blackmail, Chen said carefully, which is why you need to be extremely cautious until Saturday. I left the van feeling strangely calm. For the first time since this nightmare began, something inside me aligned. This wasn't about revenge. This was about clarity. Ethan came home late that night, energized, smiling, kissing my forehead like a man who believed his future was secure. I have to work Saturday, he said casually. Big client, crisis situation. I looked up from my phone. No problem, I said. I'll go out with friends. Relief flashed across his face before he masked it. That night, when he slept, I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. But I respected her. She wasn't naive anymore. She wasn't afraid. She was ready. Saturday came quietly. Too quietly. The sky over Los Angeles was clear, the kind of day that feels almost insulting when your life is about to implode. I spent the afternoon doing exactly what the detectives told me to do, being visible. Lunch at a crowded cafe. Photos at Santa Monica Pier with friends. Receipts. Timestamps. Smiles. By early evening, I was sitting at an outdoor restaurant, a glass of water in front of me, my phone face down on the table. Every few minutes, I felt it vibrate, but I didn't look. At 6:02 p.m., it rang. "Hey," Ethan said lightly. "Heading into the event now. Probably won't be reachable for a bit." "Okay," I replied. "Good luck." "I love you." The words felt hollow. "I know," I said. I hung up and stared at the ocean until my vision blurred. Across the city, in a hotel room I knew too well, Ethan was smiling at a man he believed was his next victim. He had no idea that every movement, every word, every calculated gesture was being recorded. At 9:14 p.m. my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I excused myself from the table and stepped away. "This is Sarah Collins from Hartwell Global Relations," a woman said crisply. "I'm calling on behalf of Diana Hartwell. Your husband has been detained this evening. We'd like to ensure he has proper legal representation." I ended the call without responding. They were already panicking. Seconds later, my phone rang again. "Detective Chen." "It's done," she said, and I heard the satisfaction she'd tried to hide for weeks. "We have Ethan, Diana Hartwell, Nicole Porter, Brandon Lee. FBI picked up 3 more associates at secondary locations. The entire operation is shut down." I closed my eyes. Not relief. Not joy. Just release. "What happened when he realized?" I asked quietly. "Tried to run. Made it to the stairwell before agents stopped him. He's claiming entrapment. Coercion. But we have him on video attempting to sedate the agent's drink. Financial records, recordings, he's finished." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "What do I do now?" "Stay somewhere else tonight. We're executing a search warrant on your home." "I understand." When I returned to the table, my friends took one look at my face and knew something had changed. "It's over," I said. The fallout hit fast. By Sunday morning, headlines flooded every major outlet. High society blackmail ring, dismantled consultant at center of multi-million-dollar extortion scheme. Photos of Ethan in handcuffs, his expression furious, exposed. Mugshots of Diana Hartwell and the others. My phone didn't stop ringing. Reporters, distant relatives, people who had once told me to stand by my husband, now desperate for commentary. I ignored all of them, except one call, the county jail. "Marina," Ethan's voice came through brittle and sharp. "You have to help me. This is a setup." I stayed silent. "My lawyer says if you testify that our marriage was real." "No," I said calmly. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean I won't lie for you, I won't commit perjury, and I won't protect you anymore." Silence. Then fury. "You betrayed me." I laughed once, humorless. "I gave the police everything," I said. "Every document, every recording, every transaction." "You," his breath hitched. "You ruined everything." "No," I replied, "you did." I told him about the charges, the reopened investigation into Rachel Lawson's death, the decades he was facing. When I mentioned her name, his breathing changed. He hadn't known. The power shifted completely. "I'm filing for divorce," I continued. "My lawyer will contact yours. I'm asking for the house. Any assets tied to criminal activity will be frozen." "You can't do this to me." "I already did." I ended the call. The arraignment was swift and brutal. Evidence stacked so high it crushed every defense strategy. Diana Hartwell took a plea deal and testified against the others. "The marriage was strategic," she said from the stand. Ethan believed having a respectable wife made him untouchable. I sat in the gallery, spine straight, listening as my life was dissected into exhibits. Bail was denied. Ethan would wait for trial in jail. The man who once kissed me goodbye like everything was normal? He never came home again. 3 months later, my house was quiet in a way it had never been before. Not the uneasy silence of secrets being hidden, not the tension of conversations avoided. Just peace. The legal process moved faster than I expected. The evidence was overwhelming, the charges impossible to outrun. Ethan accepted a plea deal. 25 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole for the first 15. Diana Hartwell received 18. The others scattered across sentences long enough to erase their illusions of power forever. The divorce was finalized the same week. The court awarded me the house. Everything tied to criminal proceeds was seized or forfeited. What remained was mine, not as compensation, but as closure. I spent an entire weekend doing something simple. I erased him. I boxed up his clothes and donated them. I shredded documents. I deleted photos. I wiped his presence from every corner of my life until the space felt breathable again. For the first time since this began, I slept through the night. Jake came over one evening with takeout and quiet companionship. We sat on the back deck as the sun dipped behind the city, the sky painted in soft orange and violet. "How are you really doing?" she asked. I thought about it. About the woman I'd been when this started. About the marriage I thought was real. About how close I'd come to losing myself trying to preserve a lie. "I'm okay," I said finally. "More than okay. I can breathe again." The next morning, I returned to work. My first call was a cardiac emergency. An elderly woman collapsed in her apartment. We arrived in minutes. I did what I always do. Focused, present, precise. She lived. In the hospital hallway, her granddaughter hugged me, tears streaming. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved her." Those words mattered. They grounded me in something real. Ethan once accused me of being self-righteous, of thinking I was better than him because I chose to save lives instead of chase money. Maybe he was right. But if believing that people matter more than profit is self-righteous, if refusing to destroy others for comfort is arrogance, then I'll wear that label proudly. I didn't win by screaming. I didn't win by revenge. I won by surviving long enough to tell the truth. The man who thought he was untouchable lost everything. His freedom, his power, his carefully crafted illusion. And I walked away without blood on my hands, without lies in my mouth, without regret. Some people believe revenge requires destruction. I learned something better. Sometimes the strongest victory is simply refusing to become the person who hurt you. As I climbed back into the ambulance, the familiar scent of antiseptic and leather surrounding me, I picked up the radio. Unit 12 available for next call. I drove forward toward another life, another chance, another moment that mattered. Free. And that was enough.